When it comes to making sequels to massively successful films, there are generally two options. One, attempt to recreate the magic of the original with a slightly different story and/or cast, usually aiming to go bigger and better. Or two, make a new film with looser ties to the original that takes the IP in an unexpected new direction. However, there is a lesser utilized third option, and that is to go absolutely unrepentantly bug-munchingly crazy in as many ways as possible. Today we'll be looking at a movie sequel that chooses door number 3, and the result has become one of the wildest big-budget cult films ever made.
It's been 5 years since the incident at Kingston Falls, and two of its survivors, Billy and Kate, have moved to Manhattan to pursue careers in the big city. They work at the Clamp Center, the state-of-the-art centerpiece of one of the most successful businessmen who has ever lived, Daniel Clamp. However, one of the many tenants of the futuristic skyscraper is a geneticist who has just gotten his hands on none other than Gizmo, the mogwai responsible for birthing the creatures that laid waste to Billy's hometown. Billy attempts to rescue Gizmo, but after a series of unfortunate accidents, it isn't long before a new batch of gremlins, now enhanced with the power of mad science, are let loose throughout the building.
Now I know what you're thinking. Geek, why are you talking about Gremlins 2 when you haven't reviewed the original? Well, first of all, I have covered Gremlins in the past, in a Patreon bonus video, in an episode of my podcast The Streaming Heap, and in a few live stream discussions. And second of all, even by my extremely loose definition of the term science fiction, I can't force Gremlins into it. It's a comedy/horror/fantasy fairy tale without any sci-fi to speak of. However, the sequel does feature genetic engineering, a mad scientist, and a running theme about modern technology, so it can be called science fiction without my comment section going up in flames. So, let's talk about it. After the unexpectedly enormous financial success of 1984's Gremlins, Warner Brothers and Amblin Entertainment were eager to put a sequel into immediate production. However, director Joe Dante wasn't interested, because he found working on the original to be exhausting, and he felt the story was suitably self-contained. With Dante out, the studio went ahead with various other directors and writers. Several scripts were written that followed the predictable paths of retreading the same ground, just with fewer budgetary constraints, or going in a completely new direction, like putting the Gremlins in Las Vegas or even on the planet Mars. But the project lingered for years in development hell. Then, with the 80s nearing an end, Warner chairman Terry Semel went back to Dante and offered him full creative control over the project if he'd agree to come back. Dante, no doubt with a mischievous grin on his face, agreed to do it on a budget of at least $30 million, which was roughly 3 times the budget of the original film. He then hired Charlie Haas, who he'd met a decade earlier, to write a screenplay, explaining that he intended to turn the entire thing upside down, to lampoon not just the original Gremlins, but also sequels in general, along with the rampant consumerism that drives their creation. Haas came up with the idea of setting the titular creatures loose on the Big Apple, but due to studio hesitation about logistics, he restricted the majority of the action to a state-of-the-art skyscraper. Dante also brought out of retirement the great Chuck Jones to write and direct a short Looney Tunes segment for the start of the film that would help prep audiences for what to expect. If you ask me though, Gremlins 2 is less Bugs Bunny and more Mad Magazine. But I'm getting ahead of myself. The opinion section comes later. Many of the original characters and cast return for the sequel, including the male and female leads Billy and Kate, played by Zach Galligan and Phoebe Cates, the not-as-dead-as-they-seemed Futtermans, played by Dick Miller and Jackie Joseph, Mr. Wing, played by Key Luke in one of his last film performances, and the real star of the show, Gizmo, voiced once again by Howie Mandel. There are plenty of new characters in the sequel as well. For the role of the mega corporate CEO Daniel Clamp, they hired John Glover. Originally written to be the film's primary antagonist, Clamp was largely based on none other than Donald Trump, who had famously opened New York's Trump Tower in 1983, with a little bit of Ted Turner sprinkled in for good measure. In a deleted scene, we learn that there are subliminal messages being pumped throughout Clamp's building, the Clamp Center, including this one.
Mr. Clamp would make a great president.
Make of that what you will. Now, like I said, Clamp was originally supposed to be the villain of the picture, but John Glover decided to portray him more like an innocent kid recklessly playing with toys, and Dante found this characterization so endearing that he and Haas softened Clamp, making him more of a bumbling figurehead who has surprisingly little impact on the actual plot. As for his power-tripping enforcer, Forster, he is played by Robert Picardo, who had previously worked with Dante on The Howling and Inner Space, and was becoming something of a Joe Dante regular. The wannabe office femme fatale, the wonderfully named Marla Bloodstone, is played by Haviland Morris, best known as Carolyn in 16 Candles. The mad scientist, the equally well-named Dr. Cushing Catheter, is played by the legendary Christopher Lee, whose first order of business upon landing the part was to personally apologize to director Joe Dante for appearing in Howling 2. During filming, the cast and crew, who were in awe of the veteran actor, threw Lee a party to celebrate his 200th film. As for Dr. Catheter's assistants, the twin geneticists Martin and Lewis, they are played by real-life twins Don and Dan Stanton, who you might also recognize from their work on Terminator 2. Other notable actors include Robert Prosky as the Al Lewis-inspired Fred, Geddy Watanabe as the stereotypical Japanese tourist, and Kathleen Freeman as Microwave Marge. Now, given that this is a Joe Dante film, there are dozens of cameos, and I'm going to go through most of them as a lightning round. There's Kenneth Tobey and Paul Bartel, Leonard Maltin, who did in fact give the first film a negative review, Julia Sweeney, John Capodici, Jerry Goldsmith and his wife, John Aston, who improv'd all of his dialogue, Henry Gibson, Daryl Hannah's sister Paige, Dean Norris, Raymond Cruz, Dick Butkus and Bubba Smith, the writer Charlie Haas, Hulk Hogan, Kevin McCarthy, the cast of Square One Television, Ray Harryhausen, Joel Brooks, Joe Dante's nephew, Joe Dante himself, Stallone's Rambo from his own tonal whiplash of a sequel, several real-life New York news anchors, and stand-up comic Rick Dukeman. There's also the vocal work of Frank Welker, who plays the Stripe-esque Mohawk, along with that rude street punk Kirk Thatcher, who plays multiple gremlins. And finally, Tony Randall voices the Brain Gremlin. Believe it or not, I'm pretty sure I missed a few. Filming began in New York City over Memorial Day weekend 1989. The Clamp Center is actually the 101 Park Avenue building, which was also used as the Penrose building in The Secret of My Success. The cheekily named Church of St. Eva Marie is, of course, St. Patrick's Cathedral. After just a few days of exterior shots, production then returned to Burbank, California, where a 10,000 square foot two-story set with a working elevator was constructed to serve as the main lobby. With a couple of exceptions, including the Canadian restaurant Chez Winnipeg that was a redressed version of the famous Baroni's Italian restaurant, everything was done on sound stages, usually platformed ones so that the puppeteers had room under the floor to work their magic. Principal photography went through September, with a few additional months of effects work. With a higher budget, a lot more work was put into the Gremlins themselves. The original designer, Chris Walas, had moved on to directing, and Dante's second choice, Rob Bottin, was unavailable as well. So Dante turned to the great Rick Baker, who initially turned down the job, but was convinced to take it when Dante assured him that he'd be free to make brand new designs for the new creatures, which Dante claims was the inspiration behind the entire genetic engineering subplot. Baker embraced Dante's more cartoonish vision for the film, as well as making a few tweaks to the always popular gizmo, such as a larger head in which to fit more animatronics and a far more expressive face. Unfortunately, Gizmo proved to be a bit of a prima donna on set.
Here's your coffee, sir.
There was also some stop-motion animation done by Doug Beswick, along with at least one very impressive miniature set. Live animals were also used in several shots, though the monkeys proved difficult to coax into working with the Gremlins, as they were actually petrified of them. The film ran much longer than anticipated, necessitating more extensive cuts than usual, even before the film was completed. One scene involved the return of Billy's persistent but dubiously skilled inventor father, played by Hoyt Axton, as a final real surprise, but with the last act already bloated, it was never actually filmed. Of all the deleted scenes I've seen, the only one I wish had stayed in the final film is one in which the Gremlins co-host Grandpa Fred's horror show. One scene that was especially controversial with the studio was the one near the climax where the film breaks and the Gremlins invade the projector booth as a nod to William Castle's The Tingler. The studio thought audiences would leave, but Dante fought to keep it in, even staging a test screening to prove that they wouldn't. For later television and home video releases, they also made an entirely separate scene in which it looks like the tape is malfunctioning and gets spliced in with some scenes from Chisholm, with the late John Wayne gunning down the mischievous creatures responsible. Gremlins 2: The New Batch released in June of 1992 mixed reviews and was a box office flop, only earning a total North American gross of $41.5 million. Despite this, Warner Brothers was keen on making another follow-up, much to the chagrin of Joe Dante, who had deliberately done his best to make sure there couldn't be a third entry. The project didn't get very far though, and it lingered in development hell for decades, sometimes as another sequel and sometimes as a franchise reboot. In 2017, however, Chris Columbus, the writer of the original Gremlins, announced that a Gremlins 3 was finally being worked on, and as recently as a couple of weeks ago, prominent figures like Zach Galligan have expressed optimism that it's really happening, though nothing official has been announced. In the meantime, there is an animated show whose first season released last year on Max, with a second season premiering next month, called Gremlins: Secrets of the Mogwai. I haven't watched it yet because, frankly, I didn't even know it existed until now, but it's got surprisingly good reviews, so I guess I'll have to check it out. As for Gremlins 2, it has developed a cult following over the years as an off-the-wall satire of itself. It is absolutely irreverent in almost every sense of the word, and it's not the kind of movie that you can get away with very often in Hollywood, which is why it's so special. When it comes to themes, it's a no-holds-barred critique of late 80s and early 90s cocaine corporate culture, of cable television and the megamall phenomenon that was running rampant throughout America, in addition to being a not-so-subtle jab at Dante's own industry. It doesn't even shy away from making fun of its predecessor, by pointing out its goofy logic or the rampant marketing that misses the point of the original film.
What if one of them eats something at 11 o'clock, but then he gets something stuck in his teeth?
Yeah, like a caraway seed or a sesame seed.
Whatever,
something.
right.
He's a Mogwai.
It's funny, I look at him, you know what I see?
What's that, sir?
Dolls with suction cups staring out car windows.
However, even in spite of its brutal humiliation of popular conventions and of its own legacy, it somehow never feels mean-spirited about it. It's self-aware enough to know that it is a product of the very things it is ridiculing. If anything, it's downright gleeful in its insanity, inviting audiences to embrace the chaos represented by its titular creatures, to giggle alongside them as they tear down every sacred cow within arm's reach. The movie also greatly exaggerates some of the themes of the original film, such as the hubris of relying on technology or the amorality of consumerism. I don't like getting too academic about comedies, but both of Dante's films contain within them a lot of relevant criticisms about American society, with one gently lampooning the Norman Rockwell vision of small-town Americana, and the other, not so gently, eviscerating the big city ideals of a more urbanized age. Now, when it comes to science fiction, Gremlins 2 features a prescient concept in the so-called smart building, which was little more than a pipe dream in 1990, but which is now all too real. The Clamp Center has everything from the air conditioning and security apparatus to the revolving doors and bathroom sinks linked together in a decentralized autonomous network that, predictably, never works as smoothly as intended. In the real world, we live in an age where people's refrigerators can stop working due to faulty firmware updates, so maybe this part of the film is more relatable than ever. For all these reasons, but mainly just because it always makes me laugh, I love Gremlins 2, and consider it one of the best big-budget sequels ever produced. It might not be as magical as the original Gremlins, but at the end of the day, it is without a doubt in my mind a sci-fi classic. And that's all for today, my fellow Earthlings. What's your favorite sequel that decided to go completely off the rails? Let me know in the comments, and while you're down there, don't forget to hit those like and subscribe buttons. Thank you for watching, and until next time when we won't have time to bleed, this is the Unapologetic Geek, telling you to never be ashamed of what you love, as long as you're not hurting anybody.
Washington didn't give up. Lincoln didn't give
Please.
up. What's wrong?
Oh, don't mention Lincoln. Something terrible happened to me one year on Lincoln's birthday.